The purpose of this channel of ours is to speak against lies, deception, and hatred. The purpose of this channel is to wake people up to the dangers of believing in the messages from communist liars who seem to thrive on ignorance and division. Before we get into debunking today's lies, welcome to Citizen Concerned, where we remind you to beware of the comrades. I'm Katlego. After you learn from today's video, don't be selfish, share it with other citizens. Listen to the reasoning of one of the highest ranking members of the EFF. This is also the individual who is representing Jacob Zuma. I can't believe the things that come out of this guy. Anyone who does not use common sense, sound reasoning, as well as evidence-based talking is not someone we should take seriously.
Others describe as outlandish cabinet demands. They are demanding the position of the deputy president and 11 ministerial positions. Would you say the same, advocate?
No. Ironically, I do not think that their demands are outlandish because the ANC has decided to go to bed with them in order to survive. So they are in a position to ask for anything. They could have even asked for 20 cabinet posts. I'm sure they would get them because the ANC is trapped by its funders to accept the DA deal.
That's a clear lie. I don't think I need to explain much there. The ANC have joined up with the DA and a few other parties to form the GNU, or Government of National Unity, not to necessarily save themselves, but simply because they do not have a majority. This man, just like the rest of the people in the EFF, is sour that they did not constitute a coalition with the ANC. Let's not forget that the funders did not vote. The people voted, and since the ANC failed to win a majority, they are left with no choice but to try something to stay in power. It only makes sense, especially since they are the biggest party within the country. The DA could have never asked for 20 positions because there's no logic in that. Positions are meant to be given out according to the size of the political party within the GNU. Therefore, since the ANC constitutes 55% of the power or the seats within the GNU, it makes sense that they should at least retain positions close to 55%. Also meaning that since the DA constitutes 30% of the power or the seats in the GNU, it makes sense that they should demand or request positions that come close to 30% of the available positions. This is the problem of adults who engage in conspiracy theories. Next.
This leadership has clearly sold out. I think the average voter who voted for the ANC, the last thing they had in mind was that they are voting for the return of apartheid, of a deal with the DA and Freedom Front.
Imagine a full-grown man saying those words. Is there any mature person that you know that says rubbish like this? Who really believes that apartheid will return honestly? That is an outdated idea, and this is the kind of idea that people like him spread across the country. White people bad, black people good. What kind of reasoning is this? Basically, any black person that voted for the DA likes apartheid, ne? Come on, man. The ANC called all parties to form a government of national unity. What did the DA do? They came to join. The Freedom Front Plus came and joined, and so did the IFP, Patriotic Alliance, and many other small parties. What did the EFF do?
The EFF are the people we regard as close to us in the left. We didn't go to the DA and ask them to govern. We didn't. I went to Julia's party, EFF, and asked them. And then he said, no, we can't govern with you. You are corrupt. I did, because I thought this is where we are. He doesn't define himself on the right. And ANC people, some of them said, you are not talking enough with the EFF. EFF gave us 10 commandments to answer. I've never had such a difficult homework, even in my school days. writing a homework and all of that, and then send it back to Floyd. And then he marks red, all of it. I said, no.
What did the MK party do?
You're asking me about the Cyril Ramaphosa ANC. We won't engage with the ANC of Cyril Ramaphosa. We can have a discussion with the ANC. But the ANC of Cyril Ramaphosa? How is that possible?
In reality, how does that work? Cyril Ramaphosa is the leader of the ANC.
We will not engage in a discussion with the ANC of Cyril Ramaphosa.
Which ANC?
The ANC of Cyril Ramaphosa. We can have a discussion with the ANC. We'll engage with the ANC, but not the ANC of Cyril Ramaphosa.
Which one are you going to?
Which the current ANC is under who?
So are you saying, as long as Cyril is the leader of the ANC,
we won't engage with the ANC of Cyril Ramaphosa. It's bought. The presidency was bought. It's a fact.
Since the ANC called all parties to form the GNU, it means that the EFF and the MK party would have had a place there. They refused to come. And now the EFF comes to make demands that are not in line with the spirit of the GNU. And now they want the DA expelled from that GNU. They are so hateful of the DA. I wonder why. The DA is not a white party. It has many black members and voters. The Freedom Front Plus has many policies that I hate more than the DA. I was never going to vote for them anyway. But remember, they were invited to come and form a government of national unity, just like the EFF and just like the MK party. The ANC invited everyone, and the MK party and EFF chose to exclude themselves.
Remember, this is nothing else but a coalition between the ANC and the DA. What we call, it's a wedding or marriage between them. The others are just bridesmaids. They are guests at the wedding. So they've invited other guests at their wedding of the ANC and the DA.
Mm-hmm. Guys, do you see what I mean? This man clearly has no idea what he's talking about, or he simply lies on purpose to mislead their followers. The government of national unity is exactly as the president called it. It is a government of national unity. Simply because they're not in it does not mean it stops being a government of national unity.
There is a technical definition of what a government of national unity is. Mm-hmm. And some of the key features of a government of national unity are that it's a combination of political parties which make up about 90% of the electorate, sometimes 85%, but not less than that. Mm-hmm. So that first part of that definition cannot be met because the forces of change, the progressive forces in South Africa now command more than 25%. So this coalition, whatever, it doesn't matter how many parties they put in, will never be above 75%. Mm-hmm. So it fails the first test of what a government of national unity is.
In 1994, the government of national unity was constituted within South Africa. Who did it include? It included the ANC, the National Party, which had been in charge of the apartheid government, and the IFP. Initially, the GNU under Nelson Mandela even stated that it wanted parties that had 10% or more to join the GNU. Cyril Ramaphosa invited everyone. So what's the problem? Just to make sure you're not lied to, when they say Government of National Unity, aka GNU, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's something different from a coalition. The fact is, a Government of National Unity is a coalition. It is what they call a broad coalition with all the major parties represented in the National Assembly.
The second test is that a Government of National Unity is put into place when there's been a national crisis, whether it's a war or, in our case, in 1994, apartheid, the devastation of apartheid, or any other national calamity. In other words, a calamity that affects all of us, whether you are a Christian or a Jew or whatever, as a nation. That's why it's called national unity. Okay. So the nation then unites. What is the national crisis that has happened now?
Elections results? No.
How can? But that's a crisis of the ANC. The ANC has lost elections to 40%. I accept that's a crisis for them. Mm-hmm. But how can a crisis of one political party be called a national crisis?
It is usually formed during a time of war or national emergency. Now, first of all, the word usually does not mean all the time.
So if you take the words government of national unity as three parts, yes, it's a government that they're going to form. We can grant them that. Mm-hmm. But national, there's no national crisis. Unity, there's no unity.
Secondly, we are in a state of crisis or some sort of emergency as a nation. Transnet has collapsed. The passenger railways have ceased to operate in most locations. They are unreliable where they do operate. Load shedding was plaguing this country for the longest time, and I hope they've closed that chapter for good. Corruption has entered all sectors of our economy and government. Services are not being rendered where they need to be. Our borders are allowing immigrants to flood our country with no papers and no critical skills. We have high unemployment. Education is very poor. That is a national disaster. And if you don't see all of that as a disaster, then you clearly are out of touch with reality, or maybe you are cushioned from reality, Mr. Dalimpofu.
There is a technical definition of what a government of national unity is. Mm-hmm. And some of the key features of a government of national unity are that it's a combination of political parties which make up about 90% of the electorate, sometimes 85%, but not less than that.
Mm-hmm. Where is this definition that this man is using? Where is it? You can't go around creating definitions in your head. Where is he getting this number from? A GNU includes all the parties that agreed to join it. In the case of the GNU of 1994, the National Party was included, but they eventually left that GNU coalition. It's up to you to refuse to join the GNU, but if the numbers pass the majority mark, that is the GNU. Did the ANC invite all political parties to join the GNU? Yes. Did all political parties come to join it? No. Technical definition, my foot. Don't try to act like you have some dictionary that we all cannot read. Please, man. The Interim Constitution of South Africa in 1994 even stated that parties that had 20 seats or more within the National Assembly were entitled to one ministerial portfolio or more. What does that mean? If you had less than 20 seats, you were not entitled to any ministerial positions. Basically, parties like the IFP, PA, PAC, Good and others would not have gotten anything. Cyril was actually too nice. Look at what that section also says about joining the government of national unity. A party holding at least 20 seats in the National Assembly and which has decided to participate in the government of national unity shall... Did you hear that? A party that has decided, a party that decides to join. The EFF decided not to join. The MK party decided not to join. So what do you want from us? The ANC was forced into this position by parties like the EFF and MK party. If those parties had tried to work with the ANC, the DA would have stood no chance.
And that's the reality. Now, the ANC wants us to believe through propaganda that they are still in charge, but they're not. Mm. The people who are in charge now is the DA. And that's what...
believe.
Yes, hard to believe, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There is nothing sophisticated here. Oh, my word, you're blowing my mind. There is nothing that he said here. The ANC is 40% in charge and the DA is 20% in charge. The people that actually lost next to the ANC are the EFF. The EFF keeps acting like it is in charge when it is not. The EFF treated the ANC as if it was the only available option, but it was not. That is why the ANC declared the government of national unity. Basically, the EFF was outmaneuvered here. Simple. The DA was more receptive to the ANC, and for good reason.
The crisis of the DA is that it wants to return apartheid, and it wants to fight anybody who talks about the land and equality. Again, that's not a national crisis. That's a crisis of 7% of the population. So it's not a government of national unity. It's a marriage of convenience between two dying forces.
This is a dumb statement that makes me realize that this man is one dull or deceitful man. First of all, in the government of national unity, you don't choose parties based on ideals. Remember that the ANC worked with the National Party as well as IFP in 1994 to form a government of national unity. Do you remember that? The IFP was a massive enemy of the ANC. People died due to the rivalry of these two parties. The National Party was responsible for the apartheid government, which was extremely hostile toward the ANC and all black people. Nelson Mandela invited both as well as other parties. The government of national unity is supposed to show that you as political parties and we as citizens are willing to work together to fix the country. That is what the ANC with Nelson Mandela wanted to achieve. Due to that, the IFP had ministers within that government. The National Party, which was the racist party, had ministers within that GNU. Not because they believed in the same thing or because they were progressive or black or some dumb points being made by this man, but because they were willing to come and work together. Simply put, they were willing to put their differences aside to work together. The MK Party and the EFF are actually not willing to work with the DA or Freedom Front Plus. The Freedom Front Plus is definitely shady, but I haven't found time to look into it yet. But I can tell you right now, guys, the DA is not the party that represented the apartheid government. The DA is not in any way a party that played any role in the apartheid government. I'll cover that in a moment, so hang tight.
So these ones have a crisis of losing an election. These ones have a crisis of hating black people. So what is it that they are uniting on? Because the DA's constituency and philosophy died in 1994 of apartheid.
This man is actually very sick. There's a serious misunderstanding in his mind regarding the GNU, or there's a serious desire to twist what the GNU is supposed to represent. The GNU is not for people that believe in the same policies to come together. It's for people to come together to find solutions to the problems that face the country at that time. Did the people that voted for ANC say, since the National Party is joining the GNU in 1994, then it means a return of apartheid? When people saw that de Klerk, a white man who was in charge of the National Party, was a vice president of Nelson Mandela, did they start saying it was a return of apartheid? No. So he's talking rubbish, just rubbish.
The ANC, which has taken the power, political power, and the trust of the people back to forces that represent apartheid, such as the DA and the Freedom Front. And I can assure you, more than half of the people who voted for the ANC never dreamt that that is what they were voting for, that they were voting for the return of the of power to the DA and Freedom Front, the forces that still represent people who were captains of apartheid. I'm not talking about a generation. I'm talking about people who were participants and who voted for apartheid several times. The National Party that brutally murdered our people. All those people who were torturing people and killing detainees are now being given power back by the ANC.
Why did the people not say the ANC was giving back power to the apartheid regime when they allowed certain white men from the National Party to join as ministers? Why? The DA had no hand in that. In fact, when the government of national unity was being established, the DA was there in 1994. It was there. It was not called the DA, but it was there. The DA even existed in the 1950s. It was established as an opposition against the apartheid National Party. The DA was in fact established out of the already existing Progressive Party. They broke away from the Progressive Party to fight against the apartheid policies of the National Party. During those days, they were called the Progressive Party. In the 1970s, they continued to grow until they joined up with smaller political parties, changing their name to the Progressive Federal Party. One of its most famous leaders at the time was Helen Suzman. She's the one who hosted the meeting that resulted in the creation of the very same party, which would be called the United Party. She is known for being an anti-apartheid activist and politician. In the apartheid parliament, she is known to have been the only person who stood against the apartheid policies. Imagine that. The only MP to stand up in parliament. And clearly, someone voted for her to get into that parliament. She is credited for also helping improve prison conditions for the anti-apartheid prisoners. She also snitched on the government to the media, letting them know about the brutality of apartheid. I'd like to read this quote. After the 1961 election, Prime Minister Hendrik F. Verwoerd announced in Parliament that he had never believed the Progressive Party would be a threat, and turning towards Suzman said, "I have written you off." Suzman replied, "And the whole world has written you off." As a sole representative of her party in Parliament, she sought to do the work of an entire opposition party by herself. In her first session, she made 66 speeches, moved 26 amendments, and put 137 questions. Most of her questions concerned treatment of Black, colored, and Indian people on issues such as housing, education, forced removals, past law offenses, detentions, bannings, whippings, police brutality, and execution. Mandela later wrote, "She was undoubtedly the only real anti-apartheid voice in Parliament, and the discourtesy of the NAT MPs towards her showed how they felt her punches and how deeply they resented her presence." On one occasion, Prime Minister Verwoerd announced in Parliament to her, "You are of no account. Your days in Parliament are numbered." Suzman replied, "Why? Are you going to put me under house arrest or put me on Robben Island?" To make matters worse, Helen Suzman was also a member of the people that the EFF hates a lot. She was a Jew from a family of Jews that immigrated to South Africa. Guess what? The National Party hated her for being a Jew too. I quote, "Suzman was subject to anti-Semitic and misogynist abuse by national MPs in Parliament and out. Frequent comments were made to her in Parliament such as, 'We don't like your screeching Jewish voice,' or 'Go back to Israel.' Marie van Zyl of the Kapi Commando, an ultra-conservative Afrikaner women's political organization, wrote to Suzman protesting the Suzman support for heathens and boasting that her own people, the Voortrekkers, had brought the Bible over the mountains to the interior to the blacks. She asked what Suzman's people had done. Suzman replied, "You say your people brought the Bible over the mountains and ask what mine did. They wrote it, my dear." In her 80s, in the year 2004, she said she was disappointed by the ANC. She said, "I had hoped for something much better. The poor in this country have not benefited at all from the ANC. This government spends like a drunken sailor. Instead of investing in projects to give people jobs, they spend millions buying weapons and private jets and sending gifts to Haiti." This is the person who was among those behind the creation of the United Party in the 1950s. That is the same party that would later change its name to the Democratic Party in 1989. and it was one of the smallest parties in 1994 when South Africa became a democracy. The name change came about when the Democratic Party decided to join hands with the National Party and the Federal Alliance in the year 2000. Guess what? The agreement to join these parties failed, resulting in the DA being left alone with nothing but the change of the name. Many members of the National Party remained. Here's something you may have not known about what happened during this period. This is actually very, very interesting. Remember that the DA wanted to unite with the National Party in 2000. Well, to achieve that, the DA requested that there should be a new law passed to allow for what they called crossing the floor. This would allow members of parliament that were initially National Party to leave the National Party and officially join the Democratic Party within the parliament. The ANC was actually against this idea at first, but guess what? Like I mentioned earlier, the National Party somehow refused to join the DA and instead chose to unite with the ANC. The members of the so-called racist apartheid regime announced that they would join the ANC instead of joining the DA, which is why the National Party did not join with the Democratic Party, aka the DA. Since this would benefit the ANC quickly changed that legislation that allowed for many members of the apartheid National Party to join the ANC. So the National Party actually refused to join the DA but chose to join the ANC. Where was Dalimpofu when this happened? He was a member of the ANC, was he not? Remember, this floor crossing legislation was approved because the ANC voted for it after the National Party said it wanted to join the ANC, and we have the facts. Between 2003, which is when this legislation was passed, and 2008, the ANC grew because of this. Between this period, the ANC gained more than 20 seats, and the DA got 10 seats, while the National Party lost 15 seats. The DA also lost 2 seats, and so in essence, they only gained by 8, while the ANC gained more than 20 seats. The Environmental Affairs and Tourism Minister, Martinus van Schalkwyk, had encouraged new National Party members of Parliament to cross over to the ANC, saying they would retain the positions they hold if they did so. He himself would join the ANC within a few weeks, he said. So the ANC invited the members of the National Party, and it even had the leader of the National Party as the Minister of Environmental Affairs and Tourism before he even joined ANC. So now you, Dalimpofu the liar, you're going to tell us that the DA is a remnant of apartheid because of what? You have the right to change history. Please, man. Please. Helen Suzman and many people like her will be remembered by those of us who love truth above everything selfish and divisive. We honor the heroes of South Africa, whether they were black or white. The EFF liars who will say anything to seem like they are holy. They will say anything to make you hate your neighbors. Not all white people supported apartheid. Not all white people are racists. And the sooner we as black South Africans remember that, the sooner we start voting based on facts and policies and not on anger against apartheid and colonialism. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Katlego. This is Citizen Concerned. And until next time, beware of the comrades.